being able to communicate effectively takes more than just being able to talk well. You have to be a listener, someone who is in tune with your spouse and not just hearing what they're saying, but hearing with the Spirit of God what they're not saying.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Jalen.
And I'm Cacie.
And welcome to the Jalen and Cacie podcast. We are marriage ministers teaching you how to master your marriage. All right, so this is a follow-up from last week where we began to introduce to you our new book coming out, 21 Days to a Better Marriage. So in the previous episode, we laid out all the steps that are going to be in that book about improving your marriage. And then now, today, we're going to focus in on one of those points, which was communication.
So we're going to talk about,
yeah, a very big one. I think it's one of my favorite topics, one of the most important parts of marriage people don't work on and need to work on. And you fix your communication, pretty much everything else will fall in place, I feel like.
Absolutely.
So this episode is about 3 very important keys to improving your communication. And then we're going to give you one bonus thing that you can do as well. And all this is coming from our book. So if you haven't already, sign up to pre-order. Link is below. But we're going to hop right into it. Ready to get started?
Always, born ready.
All right. So we got our notes here. So we're going to go into it and have a good conversation on communication.
Yeah, communication is, like you said, it is really the key to unlocking everything.
Yeah.
Because without communication, you can't have agreement. You can't have unity in your relationship. And what we realize is that people are not naturally born communicators.
Oh, yeah.
See, being able to talk well or to, what's the word I'm looking for? Orate very well does not make you a great communicator.
Yes.
Because being able to communicate effectively takes more than just being able to talk well. It takes, one, you not being a selfish person.
Yeah.
There are some people who like to be the center of attention when they talk, and it's all about them. You have to be a listener, someone who is in tune with your spouse and not just hearing what they're saying, but hearing with the Spirit of God what they're not saying.
Yeah.
Someone who is empathetic is really important to being a great communicator. Someone with understanding. So it's a lot of levels or layers to communicating other than just being able to talk well.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, I work in a business environment, in sales outside of what I do here in YouTube. And so I deal with a lot of people. I deal with coworkers, I deal with bosses, I deal with, customers, deal with people in the country, out of the country on a daily basis. And I would say over the years that I've been out there in the secular world and workplace, 90% of people don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's not, I don't ever get down on, anytime we deal with a couple, we're helping them with a problem. Communication is going to come up. We're going to tackle that. And I don't ever feel judgmental of anybody who's not a good communicator because most people are bad communicators. And we were bad communicators when we got married. Yeah. We did not know how to communicate with each other.
We didn't realize that because you and I both, in our respective places, know how to talk well, or we know how to orate. We know how to teach. Both of us are teachers. I'm a teacher, and I love teaching. Yeah. I can instruct. I can train. But learning how to communicate for the point of agreement between two people like us, married people.
Well, like you said, it's not just relaying a point, which is where public speaking comes in, but being able to interpret what someone else is saying. Yeah. So you've got to be like bilingual. In a sense, there's multiple languages that everyone, we talked about this last week, we're going to talk about it again this week about people's filters. But you got to understand, everyone is speaking their own language. Yeah. And when you confusion comes when you can no longer interpret what the other person is trying to say. Offense sets in and all that kind of thing. And, we were both, could be easily offended by each other when we first got married because we didn't know each other's intents when we were speaking and saying certain things. We didn't know, there was a lack of trust there of understanding where you were coming from or why you were doing what you were doing.
And all those things that you just mentioned has a direct relation to how we was raised, the things that we experienced in our lives, whether good or bad. We built walls, things to protect ourselves. And when you are an insecure person, you walk around with a lot of assumptions without even, digging deep and then communicating and actually knowing what some person's, actually knowing what a person's intent is towards you. We assume. So we hear that trigger word. Yep. Everybody has a trigger word or a trigger phrase that sets them off. And immediately we start imagining and thinking the worst. Yep. I know we did that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And then I will say, well, that's what so-and-so said to me when I was 9 years old. And so I just automatically think that's where you're going with it. Yeah. And so on and so on. So a lot of people have a lot of hurts and offenses from childhood and just bad relationships. You know, maybe you was married before, or you had a lot of girlfriends or boyfriends that hurt you. Mm-hmm. And so you bring that into your marriage, and that develops your inability to communicate.
That's one of the reasons we don't believe in what we call serial dating. Which
mm-hmm.
is dating a whole bunch of people before you get married, because inevitably you're going to bring in all those experiences into your marriage, and it's not fair to your spouse. Yeah. And even though we weren't serial daters, we were like each other's first for many things. Mm-hmm. Relationships with our siblings, with our parents, everything, friends, still impacted the way we handled each other. So you have enough to deal with without being romantically involved with 20 different people before you get married. So that's why we tell people, what do you call it, date with the intent to marry. Like, be sure, don't just hop into relationships in and out because I just want to be with somebody, Absolutely. Things like that, because you're jeopardizing your future marriage, because it's very, very hard to come into a marriage fresh without taking into it the experience. I remember one time I had, it was a long period of time where I couldn't eat Bojangles chicken. And the reason why was because it wasn't the chicken's fault. It was like a stomach bug that was going around because it hit me and my brother, where I got sick and I had Bojangles the night before. And so I woke up in the morning, my stomach was bothering me, and then I had like the worst stomach bug virus I ever had in my life. But the thing that I ended up vomiting up was that chicken. And that taste, the smell, the taste of it, I could not eat it for a long time because I associated it with being that sick before. Mm-hmm. So even though it wasn't the chicken's fault, I just would not eat that for a good number of years because I just kept associating it with that negative experience. And so that's the way our brains work. It's psychological, even if it's not based in reality. But we bring that relationship. You said, those trigger words,
you can have phrases. One bad experience, and automatically you have written off that. I mean, and for anybody who know what Bojangles chicken is, if you're international, you're not here. Bojangles is a restaurant that sells fried chicken and is pretty well popular known where we are. But I've had that same experience, you know, as a professional makeup artist. I have worked with a lot of people and I've had people sit in my chair and they'd be like, oh, I don't like to wear makeup because when I went to prom in 1979 or whatever it was terrible. I had a bad experience. I broke out or something bad happened. I didn't like it. I hated it. So I swore off makeup. So I don't think you can make me happy. So yeah, it took me a while to convince them, hey, just give me a try. And then when I do it, they were like, oh, I didn't know I could look this good. Yep. Well, that's because you left the conversation. You got offended at that first time. And you'd be surprised. You only need one bad experience and you'll write off everything. So imagine having a previous bad marriage or a bad relationship with someone, and you write off every man or every woman and you assume that everybody's out to get you.
People do that, and then the things that write off will be based on race, based on income, based on where virus come from. People do it based on, God forbid, horoscopes, whatever. Like the wildest things. You go on Instagram for half a minute and people got these laws they create about who they will and won't date, look at, based on what their profession is, based on what their parents look like, based on what, just all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and some people won't do it because somebody else had a bad experience. They never even experienced it, but they won't do it because so-and-so that they respected said, this happened bad for me, so it's going to happen bad for you. And they built laws. So that's one reason why social media, it can be good, but it also can be bad too, because we are experiencing everybody else's experiences through a filter. Yeah. And not having the full picture. So we write laws in our heart and say, well, so-and-so did it and they said it wasn't good, then it must not be good at all.
And if it seems like we've gotten off track of communication, we haven't, because what we're trying to say is these things, these laws you create and these cultures you created impacts the way you deal with other people. And communication is way beyond verbal. Absolutely. I mean, you read any book, even just business books of communication, they'll tell you most communication is nonverbal. But the way that you handle yourself and the way that you go in, every time someone says something, they're not actually saying what it is that they're actually saying. Yeah. And I will explain that later in our podcast. I want you to remember that. When people are telling you something, when your spouse is saying something to you, they're not actually saying what it is they're saying. The sentences we say out of our mouths usually are containers or masks that contain everything that we actually feel, our entire life of experiences. And then it all comes out in the form of something that we say out loud. And that sentence that you said in the midst of an argument, in the midst of a moment, really is not a true reflection of what it is that you actually intend when you're actually saying it.
And that's very powerful what you just said. I can't wait to get to that part because that is so true. How many times have we said things that's not really the real issue?
Oh, yeah.
At all. And body language, we're going to talk about that too, because body language is communication. I know I used to have, and I think I kind of do still have what I call a resting face. And as a kid, I've had a very strong resting face. And most people did not find it easy to approach me because they automatically thought that I was mad or had an attitude or something like that. And I'm like, no. And then they were shocked and surprised. Or someone may have said something negative about me and they're like, well, I thought you was this way because so-and-so said. I'm like, well, so-and-so never spent any time with me. So I usually surprise people just how nice I am. Or giving or friendly or caring, because my body language doesn't always reflect that. But I'm working on that. Like, I think I've gotten better. But at the end of the day, I'm saying that your body language can also be a very strong form of communication. So sometimes our spouses, I know you would come in the house and you had this look on your face. I'm like, what's wrong? And you'd be like, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm like, I don't believe you.
Yeah. Sometimes you're right.
Most times I'm right though. Yeah. But let's get into this communication.
Yeah, let's get into it.
I know you're like, you already got into it.
I know, right? Exactly. All right, so we're going to get into the first key. So key number 1 is going to be what we talked about last week, understand your filter.
Yeah.
All right, and if you didn't listen in, we're going to kind of explain again what that is. When we talk about a filter is basically the way that you see the world. There's like a lens through which you see the world based on the way you were raised, the kind of friends you had, the experiences you had, whether those were traumas or victories. You know, different things like that. You know, you told me how when you were growing up, when I was growing up, we used to like climb trees and like jump off of them. And we would climb up this little shed in my backyard and jump off. So my perception of heights is very different from yours, because when you were growing up climbing trees, something else happened different from what happened with me.
Well, I didn't get a chance to climb trees. But, you know, and shout out to my mom. Hey, Mom, I love you. But she had her own fears and phobias, things like that, from where, I don't know. Maybe because she is short, she's height challenged. My mom is 4'9". But anyway, you know, as I was climbing things like the jungle gyms at the park and stuff, she would always be like, get down from there. You know, don't go too high. You might fall, you know. And I guess continually saying that, I just built up a fear of heights and things like that. I don't think my father was fond of heights either as well. And he was a tall man.
But it's slightly genetic.
I don't know. So yeah, it may be genetic, but... So hearing you and your mom and your dad letting you just you and your brother, you know, do wild stuff like literally jumping off of buildings. I know
the building sounds bad. It's like a shed.
Okay, it's a shed, but still though, I mean, just jumping off stuff, climbing trees, doing things. That wasn't my upbringing. So I grew up more cautious than you. Yeah. And so you can imagine marrying him and he's not being the cautious person that I am. We've had a lot of run-ins just because I'm more cautious. I'm more aware of danger. I'm, you know, like,
so
don't want to get hurt.
That affects our perception. Yeah. So when I see something high and we got to climb a ladder or get, like, for example, on our honeymoon, we got into this thing called a sky. It was like a Ferris wheel. It's enclosed.
But it's
and we got
very,
on that.
Very
Me,
huge.
I didn't think twice about it. Her, she's sitting there looking around, making sure everything's okay, and kind of nervous. I felt like she didn't really get a chance to truly enjoy it.
I'm literally not. I am holding my breath.
Yeah.
On this thing. This thing is like you can see the whole city, the whole like shoreline from this thing. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But I was panting the whole time. I'm like, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to be brave. Every little sway of the wind, I am just like, get me out of this box.
Yep. And so my filter says, this is pretty cool. Nothing to be scared of. Nothing about it. Her filter says, this isn't totally safe. How do we know this thing is not going to collapse? Are the people operating this, are they doing their job right? I need to see the reports of has this thing ever stopped or broken or anything like that. When was the last time
it was maintenance?
All this stuff goes through her head. So we're looking at the same thing. We're in the same little box, having the same experience, but we're having two different experiences. Why? Because of our filters, our perceptions.
Definitely.
Built on things that happened before we ever met each other. So take that example and then apply that to the life of you and your spouse and realize that every time y'all get into arguments and disagreements and things, these filters are playing a key role in that. So you got to understand your filter, then you got to communicate with your spouse and get to know them to understand their filter. If you're constantly in disagreement and with your spouse, you're constantly arguing, the first thing I would say is not so much focus on trying to resolve all those arguments, but get to know each other better. You may say, well, I do know them. A lot of times, 9 times out of 10, you don't know your spouse as well as you think you do. I'm learning things about her every day.
Even to this day, and like just going back to that example on the Skywheel, I think you kind of understood a little bit beforehand, you know, what my reservations were about heights and things. The whole time we're in that box and you watching my reaction, you weren't berating me. You weren't telling me, oh, you're stupid. Just get over it. You know, nothing's happening. Don't you see all those people getting on and off, you know? And that was very important. And not that you coddled my fear because we're believers and we don't believe in fear, but you had to understand where I was coming from. And just the mere fact that I got in it, that was step one.
Big step for you.
You have to encourage the fact that, oh, I'm proud that you stepped into this box. I know you were afraid of heights. But the whole time there, you could not berate me and make me feel like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're chicken, you know, you're stupid or whatever. Because that would discourage me from ever doing it again. And I did do it again by my own suggestion. I decided I won't do it again though. But in the light of marriage, a lot of times when we don't understand the filter of our spouse and we're having these run-ins in our communication, we're berating one another. And we're calling each other outside of our names, and we're just calling you stupid and you're crazy and what's wrong with you, blah, blah. Y'all know the stuff you call each other and how y'all fight because you're not coming from a place of understanding. And that's going to shut a person down. For me, I don't like to be yelled at. I don't like screaming and yelling, and I hated it. And we don't do that with each other, but when you get to a level where I feel like your voice is about to get to an uncomfortable level for me, I would just completely shut down. And you didn't understand why I would just shut down. And it's like, I'm done. I'm out. I can't talk no more. Because I don't like fussing. I don't like yelling. I don't like hearing that at all. Like it just completely turns me off. Yeah.
And, you know, one of our issues that we had issues with was finances. And I remember when we were getting on the board of like, okay, we're going to stop using credit cards. We had one, whatever. I was ready to just like cut mine up, and you were a little slower on that. And I remember getting frustrated with you, like, do you not care that we need to fix our finances and we need to get out of debt and you got to stop spending if you want to like that. But that was the thing. And it took me a while, but I understood finally that what your hang up was that you were afraid of being in a situation where you needed to get something, buy something, whatever, and you didn't have the money, but you could put on a credit card, and that was like a security measure for you. And although you mentally assented to the fact that that's a bad thing to depend on a credit card, and that fear is what catches everybody up, and that makes everyone get into debt, it didn't change the fact that was still an issue that you had, a hang up. And so I had to understand that and kind of wait and kind of slowly come along to the point where you got on board and were like, okay, we're going to put this down. We're not going to use this anymore. You know, we're not going to use a credit card anymore. And, but that was a point of contention for us because I didn't get why you wanted to keep using it. I thought you just weren't in agreement. You were, you know, trying to resist me, even though I was trying to lead us in our finances.
Before we was married, you know, I had several credit cards and, you know, through my own business, and this is how I did things. Having a credit card was a status symbol too for me. You know, not knowing about finances the way we know about it now, when we first got married, having a credit card was a status symbol. It was something that I feel like everybody had. And once you was able to qualify for a credit card, a certain amount, to me, that meant that you was doing okay. I know it's dumb. It's backwards thinking. Credit cards, we don't do that no more. But back then that was the case. So not having one is like, what? I mean, even if we just use it for an emergency, like what do we have emergency? What do you mean? You know? And I knew where we were in our money. So it wasn't like we had a whole stash of cash somewhere where I felt like, oh, we don't need a credit card. No, bro, we need this credit card just in case, you know? So, but you didn't understand that, what a credit card meant to me.
Yeah. Me, it was nothing. Like my family, I know we had credit cards, but it wasn't a thing. Like it just was what it was. I mean, my family grew up with financial problems and issues, things like that. But I don't think credit cards was something that was just, I knew a whole lot about. So for me, it was no different to just stop using them because I didn't grow up seeing them used a lot, you know? So again, I had a completely different filter when it came to the credit card than you did. And so we saw it differently.
Yeah.
And so that caused contention until we could understand each other. But so understand your filter, understand your spouse's filter by getting to know them. And then I want us to talk about cleaning your filter. Mm-hmm. And now we're looking at it like an air filter that you have in your car, you know, when it gets all dusty and then the air can't get out, home. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah, same thing in your home. And then everything's not running efficiently. When your filters are clogged with all your traumas and your messes and your burdens, communication will not be efficient in your marriage. And it's going to always be disagreement and discontent and all of that. So I say you got to clean your filter. And what does that look like? I think to me, that looks like constantly doing self-analysis.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days of our marriage, we would have a lot of conversations, even if they were not very pleasant. And we would always hit these walls because we were determined to communicate, learn this thing about communication. And yeah, sometimes we would have tears. We wouldn't, you know, come to any kind of conclusions or agreement, you know, when we first started doing this thing. But we had to, like you said, clean the filter. We had to expose what was in there so we could deal with it the right way. And as a married couple, the objective is to become one. And to create your own language. Yeah. Because, you know, we come from two different families with two different issues. You know, our families aren't perfect. You know, they both had their own issues and stuff like that. So, and I grew up one way, you grew up one way, seeing something and seeing different things. And we brought that into our marriage. And it's like, okay, what do we want and what we don't want? We got to create our own language. This is Jalen and Cacie. This is how we communicate. This is how we disagree. This is how we, you know, discuss important matters. And we had to establish that as our way and stick to it no matter what was thrown our way. And as long as we do that and honor the new filter that we've created for our marriage, we will always have peace. We will always have agreement, even if it's uncomfortable stuff. Yeah. You know, because challenges will come. We don't agree on everything. We may look like it, but we don't. But we have a way that we communicate and we talk. And now that we've been married for a while now, I know the things that are triggering for you. I know what not to say because I forget what it is I used to say all the time that used to just...
Oh, you're not listening.
He would just... You would have thought I called him like some derogatory name. And I would say, you're not listening. And he would just go off. I'm trying to figure out, well, I'm saying what I see. You're not listening. And it would just bug you. So why? Why did I bug you so much?
Because I took great pains to be the kind of man that would be empathetic and would give you a voice so that you could communicate. And so you saying that I wasn't listening was a slap in the face of that because I know for a fact that I was. I mean, I understood what was going on. I need you to explain it or something like that. But it's definitely not that I'm not listening. And so you not perceiving how much I am listening was bothersome, you know, because like you're trying something and it's not having an effect. Yeah. So it would get about it. But and the other part of cleaning your filter though is not just understanding, you know, what buttons to not push with your spouse, but understanding for yourself that I got to stop being so touchy.
That's true.
I got to stop being so easily offended. You know, and that's why I'm saying you got to have that self-analysis because while it's great if your spouse is someone who is going to go out of their way to make sure that they're not going to try to re-wound you in old wounds, you've got to also, on the other end of that, decide, regardless of what they're doing, I'm not going to be so easily offended. I'm going to actually be healed of these wounds. And that's where the Holy Spirit comes involved because if we're going to build this new language between ourselves, there's got to be a basis for this language. There's got to be a source code. Yeah, that's the Word of God.
You have to lay down the old way.
Yeah.
You got to forget those things the Bible talks about, those things that were behind you that can easily beset you or I'm using hold you down, anchor you down. Yeah. You got to stop. You got to let it go because it's going to drag you down. It's going to drag your marriage down. If you was hurt when you was a child or from a bad relationship, your parents hurt you or whatever, you have to lay it down. I won't say get over it. You need to cast that care over unto the Lord and let him heal you for real. I truly believe some people don't want to be healed.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot easier to play the victim.
People love to be the victim. They love to be dramatic because it's a manipulative character who, from a person who doesn't want to be healed. They're not seeking healing. And I think that's the difference between me and you versus a lot of couples that we have dealt with is that we were seeking wholeness. We didn't want to continue to operate in the pains and the hurts and disappointments that we experience in our lives. We wanted something better for us. We wanted the kingdom marriage that we knew that we were supposed to have. So that meant we had to do the work. That meant that we had to lay down our way of doing things and adopt God's way of doing things. And that's not always easy because God's way it seems so like it's giving. Yeah. God's way is giving. And in communication, you have to be a giver. So that means you have to be willing to be wrong, even when you're right.
Yep, that's true.
I mean, I don't know if y'all heard what I just said. Sometimes you have to be willing to be wrong, even when you're right. Yep. Because it's not about trying to get your way. It's about getting God's way.
Exactly.
And so when that is your objective all the time, you will come to these points of agreement a lot quicker. It takes practice, but a lot quicker. And I mean, we hardly ever disagree. Or I would say argue. We don't argue. We're not fighters like that. But when we do have disagreements, we know how to navigate through it so we're not upsetting our balance in our home.
Yep, exactly. Before we continue on to the next point, the next key, we want to take a moment here to talk about what we talked about earlier, which is to sign up for pre-orders for our book.
Pre-orders,
so link is below in the description of this video. It's a link. Click that. You put in your name, your email address, and we'll make sure you're on the mailing list so that when it's time for the book to go into pre-order mode, I'm going to put it like that, on Amazon, we'll let you know so you can get in line and get the book when it comes out later this
I'm excited
summer.
For this book because this book is a very interactive book and it's done this way on purpose because in order to master your marriage, you have to put your hands to the plow. Like you have to put your hands to the work. So I'm so excited for people to get their hands on this book and really start working because it's going to be amazing.
All right. So go ahead and hit that link below. Sign up for it. 21 Days to a Better Marriage. It's a book with teaching like we're doing now, plus a guide, a 21-day challenge, if you will, with journaling and everything that will allow you with prompts and things, walking you through day by day for 21 days, steps that you can take to put these principles into action that you can take that is going to improve your marriage. So 21 days from the day you start that book to the day you finish that 21st day, things are going to look a lot different. And you're going to have the tools to be able to continue putting these principles in practice. And you can, and the great thing about this book is you can continue to do it
over and
multiple
over
times a year.
And what's great about this, that we're actually putting ourselves through these things again. We've done this before already, but it's like a tune-up.
Exactly.
I don't care how long you've been married. You have to have regular maintenance, regular tune-up. And so it's been interesting going through it again this time around. And it's like, okay, we've grown. But there's always still places to grow.
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving into key number 2, which is going to be practicing communication. So this is the practical point now. So you're going to have to actually treat it like practice. You want to get good at any skill, basketball, playing piano, cooking, you got to practice. You have to actually try it. And it seems pretty obvious, but it's not, because there are people who just don't talk. I was a person who didn't like talking about my feelings. She asked me what's wrong. Nothing. I was lying. There was something wrong. I just didn't want to talk about it because I was embarrassed about it. I was ashamed of it. I didn't know how I felt about it. I wanted to figure it out myself. I didn't want any help. Whatever the problem was, I didn't want to talk. And there are people like that in a lot of marriages who just don't like talking about deep things, about emotions, about feelings, whatever, and whatever the reasoning is. But that's not going to work. You're going to have to practice talking, opening up, being vulnerable.
And I remember you used to get kind of annoyed because I would just nag you until you opened up. Because I'm like, don't tell me nothing's wrong. I see it in your eyes. I see it in how you kiss me. I see it in all your whole demeanor. And it's like, bruh, something is wrong. And the reason why I was so persistent, because I grew up in a home where we didn't talk about our feelings a lot. Like we weren't deep. We were deep people, but emotionally it's like, your emotions are to yourself. Like you keep it to yourself. And, not going to get into why that is. It's not a podcast for that. But the point is, I didn't want to be that way. Because I know what it feels like to bottle up my feelings. I used to be bottled up so much. And then all of a sudden, I would have these volcano eruptions of emotions. And my parents would be like, girl, what is wrong with you? And then it would be almost coherent. Because I'm digging from like wells deep of emotions and unspoken things and misperceptions. That's what I did
learn about you and your filter was that once we get to the depth of a thing, and we're actually going to talk about that now, I was trying to mention earlier, that a lot of times, it will be like a stream of consciousness for you. Stuff will come out that seemed that nothing related, but it all built in, and we're finally like, okay, now we're getting to the root of the issue. And I learned that about you.
And that root can be deep depending on what you've been through. And that's why sometimes it didn't make sense. Why I would get so angry at some of the most smallest things. but I was digging deep from a well of just me being bottled up, not knowing how to express myself or not being allowed to express myself or just feeling like I wasn't allowed to express myself and just feeling like I don't know how to do this. So I'm going to keep it to myself. I'm going to deal with it, you know, but I have learned a lot more about just being open up, and I'm glad that I feel safe now to communicate my feelings and emotions. Even if what I'm feeling is wrong, I still need to reveal it so that correction can come.
Exactly. So you want to set aside time to talk as a couple.
Yeah.
And we do that in the 21-day challenge. You have to actually set aside a timed amount of time, like a set amount of time, and you guys have to talk. And you got to talk. And you got to make yourselves
And I know that
speak.
sounds like, oh, that's easy. Anybody can do that. No. We've had couples do this, and it was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
Because people are not used to talking to one another.
Even when you're married.
Even when you're married, like you talk at each other, you talk past each other about things, like about the kids, about, you know, job, finances, or whatever. But talking to know someone is something that a lot of people don't do.
Yep.
And it's amazing to me. So a lot of couples feel very awkward the first few times because, like, I don't even know what to talk about.
Yep.
Because we don't do this.
Exactly. So you guys set aside time to talk. And then one of the very big keys here is listening to understand. And you're the one that kind of, I don't know if you coined the phrase, but you were the one who brought it up, not me. But I don't know if anyone else has ever said it before. Forgive us if we took it from you. But listening to understand is vitally important. You've got to be able to, when you're listening to someone talk, and that's what I would say 90% of communication is listening and hearing the person. But when someone's talking, just take a moment and try to have this moment of perception, this epiphany that they are a human being separate from you.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm trying to figure out how to explain it, but it's like, you got to understand that the same way that you are a person who has had experiences and lived life and has done things and come up with ideas and has done things that are just genius and done things that are just stupid and made mistakes and made right decisions and have helped people and hurt people. And you know all these things about you, and all these things make you who you are. Understand that the person sitting across from you has their own set that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
They've had all the same life lived, but just different experiences, different people, different victories, different losses, different hurts, different wins, all of it. And they're sitting across from you. That is a whole other human being with a soul that has been through things same as yours, but it's completely different. And when you have that awareness as you're listening to someone, you got to understand, I really don't know what's going on beneath the surface. I may think that I do, but all of what I think they are doing and acting and all of that, my perception of who they are, is limited based on my perception.
Yeah.
So I really will, it's wild to think, but you're married to this person for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You may never truly know who they are if they don't choose to reveal it to you. And if the Holy Spirit doesn't choose to reveal it to you.
Yeah, I think because as individuals, we present ourselves a certain way.
Yeah.
And I can remember, getting married the first couple of years, just like, I was kind of shocked that you wasn't the person I thought you were, because I presented myself a certain way, put together, very entrepreneurial and just, business. I'm a boss chick kind of thing. But behind the scenes, I had a very disorganized closet. Inside joke. Oh, well, not joking anymore. Well, I mean, seriously, listen, if before I got married and had a kid, I had a very clean car. Like, my car is clean, trunk clean, vacuum my trunk. Like, I'm that person. My car was clean, okay, organized. My workstation when I was in the salon, clean, organized, everything put together. I hate disorganization. And if you ever was around me, I'm very quirky. I like things a certain way. But the one thing nobody ever saw was my disorganized closet. And I'm telling y'all, so listen, I had a disorganized closet, and I don't know why. I psychoanalyze myself a lot, and I just say because I was so pinned up, I had to have one messy area that I could release mess into. And to this day, my amazing husband, he is the person, I do laundry, he folds the laundry, and he would put it away. Because for some reason, I can keep a house, I decorate our home, and but the closet is my thing. So I'm saying all that to say is that we think we know our spouses because of how they presented themselves. Yeah. So we get very offended when we see their messy closet and try to figure out, why the heck do you have this? You're not who I thought you were. And then we get offended because we feel like we're being lied to, basically. Yeah. That's true.
Been gaslit, basically.
Yeah. And so now you're making these decisions like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. So that's why when you're talking, like I said, listen to understand. So you're listening to try to understand that whole other human being that you don't completely know yet.
I'm going to call it the messy closet theory.
Messy closet. Messy closet principle. Yeah. And so you want to understand who they are. So I'm listening not to reply. I'm listening not to get to the end of the conversation or just to get some information. I'm listening to understand who you are. To know.
To be intimate with that person.
Yep.
And that is something that a lot of married couples don't get to.
Yeah.
And that word yada is a spiritual term. You know, it means to be intimate.
Yeah.
When we say intimate, we automatically think sexual. But in light of that, think about the type of submission and what it takes to be even sexually intimate with someone. It takes a lot of surrender. It takes a lot of vulnerability to do that and to be that. It's very secretive in a way, you know, and it's between you and that person. So your communication ought to take on that same level of honor and respect. At least we honor intimacy. A lot of people don't, you know, and our culture doesn't. But honor your communication. You preserve, protect. You know, this is between you and I. And this is me getting to know you on a level that nobody else knows you except God. And it's intimate and it's valuable.
Okay. So let's say this. If you treat conversation and communication with your spouse with the same carefulness that you would treat sexual intimacy with them, that'll tell you how you should respond. Because it shouldn't be something that hurts them.
Yeah.
You should be making sure that
they feel safe,
they feel secure, they're getting what they need out of it, and not just you getting what you need out of it.
Absolutely.
Okay? You want to make sure that this happens again. So you want to make sure they're pleased with the outcome of this conversation, with this session, because you want to make sure they want to do it with you again.
Yep.
So the same way you handle sexual intimacy carefully, handle conversation, communication sexually. Don't abuse them verbally. Don't attack them. Don't dismiss them. Don't dismiss their desires and their needs, whatever they are. Because it's important and it's valuable and you want this to happen again. You take that kind of attitude into it, that'll change your communication.
I feel right now some people are like, well, my sex life, man.
I'm sorry.
That's a whole other podcast.
Let's fix communication, then we get to the intimacy. Because seriously, though, you fix your communication, that does help your intimacy.
Yeah, it does. It really does. But communication is very, very, very intimate and valuable.
Yeah, so listen to understand. And also that leads into don't rush to reply, which is kind of just a no-brainer. Like if you're listening, to be listening with, I know what I'm going to say, because you'll be missing everything they're saying because you're in the middle of trying to think about what you want to say back. And it's like, sometimes just listen. Like, it's not about replying. And that leads into this point that I think is going to be kind of the crux of this whole conversation that I was mentioning before. And that's to ask more questions.
Yes.
Remember what I said earlier about what the person is saying is not actually what they're saying. And so 90% of communication is listening. And if you become a skilled communicator, and I work in sales, so I kind of seen this even just in a business environment, but you want to listen more than you want to be talking, more than you're trying to sell what you're selling. You want to listen because you're trying to find out what that person really needs so that you can sell it to them. All right. So in communication with your spouse, understand that if you ask them a question like, okay, we had an argument earlier. I was picking up the kids and we got the time wrong. I was picking them up 5:30. You blew up on me on the phone. Now, here in the evening, we're trying to talk and work this out. Why'd you blow up so bad? Okay, your spouse's immediate response is going to be, well, because you had my kid out there an extra 30 minutes, they could have napped and saved, blah, 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 stuff like that. Okay, that's the initial response. And you could leave it there and just say, I'm sorry, and that could be the end of it. Or you can keep asking questions.
Yeah.
So if I'm in that situation, let's say that happened. I'm not patting myself on the back, but I'm a pretty skilled communicator now. So if that were her response to me,
on the back.
Thank you. if she said that back to me, I would say, okay, I get that. But the kid had a cell phone. You were on the phone with them the whole time. I understand that I was wrong and missing the time and everything. But why were you so scared? Like, what did you think was going to happen? And then she would answer again, and she might be frustrated. And we've had conversations like this. So I'm kind of walking you through based on memories that we've had. By the time we're done, we're no longer even dealing with the fact that I was 30 minutes late. We're dealing with the fact that now she's remembering a time when she was a kid where she got lost in the grocery store.
True story.
That all the way. And that traumatized her because she was afraid that she was gone, like they were gone. But I'm saying by the time the conversation is over, we're going into stuff that has nothing to do with the initial thing, but it's now helping me to understand where she's coming from and have an appreciation of it. So
I'm sorry to cut you off, but also your tone and when you're asking your questions, don't be accusatory.
Yeah.
You know, it could be a better way of saying the question would be, well, how could I have done something different to make you feel safer? Or what could I have done? Or where did I misunderstand?
Yeah.
How you ask the question your tone makes a big difference on how the person receives it and how they're going to respond to you. Now, it may not always work all the time because you can't control the individual. You can't control how they're going to respond.
Good point. Yeah.
Please know that. Just because you've done everything right, you could do everything right. You cannot control another individual's response. So don't get offended and say, well, this stuff don't work. The person can have a bad day. Your spouse can be having a really bad day, and those tactics may not be working. This is where you may have to just not say anything at all. Yep. Okay? Go in your prayer closet. Pray for them. Sometimes they need a hug. They need to be able to vent sometimes. It's a lot of things.
And mentioning being wrong, even when you're right, there's sometimes where something's just so emotionally charged for your spouse, you just got to let it go. And just say, I'm not going to be offended by this. I feel like maybe I was right, but it's going to do more damage trying to fight to the last detail on this.
Especially at this moment.
Yeah, exactly. Let it go. This will come back around at some point.
Yeah, it will.
We'll deal with it. And there's been things where we've had run-ins, issues, disagreement, and it took several communication sessions of different times over the years before we finally got to the root of a thing. And the reason why it's important to get to the root of a thing is because it helps you appreciate where your spouse is coming from. Because sometimes you think your spouse is just naggy, they're just fearful, they're just anxious, they're just controlling and all these different things. And it could be those things.
Yeah.
But once you get an appreciation of, okay, now I get why you're this way. It may still be wrong, but I have some empathy now. I have some sympathy for you that, okay, based on the way you were raised, based on how you grew up, the things you went through, I get it. I get why you don't want me yelling at you. And I know
somebody, I can hear it right now. Somebody say, well, that can't always be an excuse for how they respond to me. No, it's not an excuse for them to treat you bad or to be a bad communicator. It's not. But having that understanding and that knowledge can help you respond better.
And you'll handle them differently because here's the assumption we make when we make these videos. We assume you love your spouse.
We assume you do.
We assume that you want to be a better husband or a better wife. And we assume that you're willing to, like Jesus, do the right things even when your spouse is doing the wrong things. We assume that you're a sacrificial lover because that's how you're supposed to be in marriage when God invented in marriage. We assume you're not selfish. We assume you're not just doing all this just to get something out of it. And we assume that you're willing to love your spouse into redemption, that by doing the right things unto them, that gives an avenue for the Holy Spirit to get involved and will bring about change in them.
Yeah.
So, yes, your spouse should be more mature and not as easily offended, not so touchy and all that. But there's a good chance that all throughout their life, they've just been fighting and combating people verbally. And they've never had someone to just love them and say, okay, I get it. I'm going to handle you differently. Sometimes that amount of love to someone will break them, break through their shell, and then they'll see themselves and realize, man, I'm kind of trash right now. I need to work on this. I need to change. I need to be different because it's very hard for someone to sit in the presence of love and not be shamed by that love to change, to rise up to the occasion. That's just the way that it works. And if you look at Jesus with his disciples, there were constant places where they were messing up and doing the wrong thing. But love, Jesus' consistent love throughout the entire situation brought them to a place where they rolled up to the challenge of loving like him. And that's what you're here for with your spouse. So stop being offended by your spouse's offense and see it as an opportunity to walk and talk like Jesus unto them, because that's the only way they're going to ever change.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I do, and I've done for many, many, many years, even before marriage, is that I always took the position of maybe I'm wrong. That's the first question I ask, or I say to myself, maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I can be corrected. If you can't be corrected, it's going to be hard for you to communicate or to receive communication. Because if you come into a situation thinking, I am always right, I'm right all the time, my way or the highway kind of mentality. If you look at the person that you're communicating with as someone who is lower than you, you're gonna always be in trouble, man. Yep. And this is one thing that I appreciate about our relationship is that we value each other and we don't lord over each other. Mm-hmm. We understand that we are equally as valuable in this relationship. Yep. Your opinion is equally as valuable as my opinion. And so it creates an environment where we can communicate safely. But if you come in this thinking that I'm cream of the crop and my word is this, whatever, you're going to hit heads all the time. You're going to hit a wall every single time.
Yep. So ask more questions when you're listening, when you're communicating. Because remembering the first answer they give you is not all of what it is. Because you understand, people don't even know half the time why they respond the way they do. A lot of people aren't self-analytical.
People are mostly reactive.
Yeah, everybody just reacts to everything. And people rarely even know. Like I've talked to people like in guidance sessions like that, one-on-one. And after they start talking, they start realizing why they are the way they are or how something in the past affected who they are now. And I'm the one that had to tell them, you realize you're acting this way because of this thing here. And they're like, oh, like a light bulb comes on. And it's like, you realize not everybody self-analyzes themselves. Yeah. So you're going to actually help your spouse, almost like a therapist on the couch. Mm-hmm. You're going to help them. And what do therapists do most of the time? They listen. They ask questions. They get you talking. They charge you for it. Give your spouse a free therapy session. Listen, let them talk, and keep asking them questions until the light bulb comes on for them. They realize, wow, this is why I act the way I do. Yeah. That awareness will spark change just in and of itself. It does. It does. So keep asking questions because the first answer they give you ain't really it. It's not even so much they're trying to lie to you. A lot of times they just don't even know the real reason until you start digging into it and then you realize, oh, shoot, this is why I am the way I am.
You have to be an investigator of your spouse. I think you said this to me some time ago. It's like, it's your mission to investigate and to know me. Mm-hmm. So that takes listening and it takes observation. And it just takes you just being patient. Yeah. And really being patient. And patience is a really big key in communication. But if you really truly want to know your spouse, be all in. Be an investigator. Be a private eye. Not suspicious because you think you're doing something wrong. Okay? Y'all stay with me now. Yeah. But I'm talking about, there are people who, like my brother, he likes cars, And when you talk to him about cars, he know all about his car because he takes time to investigate and to know about the engine. I'm not a car person, but get to know all about that kind of stuff. And he can verbatim tell you things because he's taking time to investigate and to research and things like that because this is his passion. He loves talking about these things. So if your spouse is your passion, you love them, you're going to spend time researching. And this takes time, spending time with the Holy Spirit. We talked about this in the last podcast. You can't do this without the Holy Spirit, the one who knows your spouse better than any human being could ever can. So you have to research and say, Holy Spirit, show me my spouse. Give me the words to say to my spouse. Because like we said before, sometimes when you're in the heat of the moment, it may not be the right time to say what you need to say. But you say, Lord, I trust that you're going to help me find the time and give me the right words to say when the time is right. Because the whole objective, again, is to bring wholeness, agreement, and unity in your marriage.
Amen. So that brings us to key number 3, which is when you're having these conversations, you're going to have to set some rules and some boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to end up arguing all the time.
All the time.
So these are real easy. First one is don't assume. Don't make assumptions. If I ask you a question and then you respond to me, I can't assume why that is or why you have that opinion or why you responded that way and all of that. I mean, we do that all the time. If I'm on the road and you text me and you say, where are you? I can assume, oh, you don't trust me. Why you ask me where I am? You think I'm doing something wrong? Blah, blah, whatever like that. That's an assumption. Okay. Maybe later on, you could ask her, why'd you ask? Where'd you think I was? Like, oh, well, I want to know where you were because I was going to ask you to stop at the store for me so you can pick something up. Pretty simple, right? But we make assumptions.
Well, because, my last girlfriend or my ex-wife used to do that all the time and she was this bitch. Okay, but I ain't your ex-wife.
Exactly.
I ain't your last girlfriend.
But that's how easy it is. You make a law saying, I'm never going to be married to somebody that don't trust me. Yep. And it's like, well, doing that and then they don't trust you. They just want to know what you were at. Sometimes what about you? Because actually would bother me sometimes. You be asking me that in the house, like, where you at? Like, you would text me. And I'm like, what does it matter? And it wasn't, I didn't thought I was doing something wrong, but it was just kind of annoying, like, having to answer those questions. But you just like knowing what's going on. Like,
I'm a security person. I love safety.
You want to know what's going on. You want to be facing the door in a restaurant in case something crazy come in. Like, you have security and knowledge.
Yeah.
And knowing where everyone is at all times, where everything is at all times. You want to make sure we get these water bottles, we go to the water store and fill them up. I'll be like, the other one, is that empty yet? Okay, but we need to fill up 2 extra ones just in case. Well, what do you mean just in case? It's fine. We never run out of water. What if there's a blizzard? Well, babe, it's summer. Or what if there's a heat wave? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you are always prepared for everything. And I have to admit, I live a little more on the edge.
Very
and it
much
has
on
worked
the
out
edge.
sometimes when you've been over-prepared and then we needed it. So I've learned that, okay, I should probably listen to you.
I always say, I'm apocalyptic ready.
Yeah.
Anytime the apocalypse happen, I'm going to be ready. Okay?
So, again, don't assume when you're having these conversations. If you don't know, ask the question. Don't assume that you just know what's going on. The biggest issue I see is people to say, yeah, my spouse is just like this, that, the other. And it turn out it ain't even like that. Mm-hmm. You're making assumptions. Don't get nitpicky on details, okay? Sometimes y'all talking and be like, well, the reason that bothered me is because last time this happened, you did blah, blah, blah. And they get a detail wrong. And you're like, well, that's not what happened. What really happened was blah, 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 blah. And it's like, before you know it, the conversation is derailed because you're trying to correct every little detail.
Absolutely.
This is very practical advice here. Don't get nitpicky on the little details. At the end of the day, everyone's perception is different. People misremember things. People don't remember stuff right, blah, blah, blah. If you get caught up in every little detail, you're never going to get anywhere in this conversation. So don't get nitpicky.
Because even if you're right, you can be 100% wrong in the way you handle things. And now you said you create a bigger mess, a bigger issue that did not have to be because you got to be Mr. or Mrs. Nitpick all the time. And, it could be a hot mess. We've seen it so many times and it gets you nowhere.
Yeah. And then they're like, let it go. Like, it's not that big a deal.
It really
let this little small detail go. All right. And the last thing is don't get offended. And we kind of mentioned this before, but what I mean by this time is if you're talking and your spouse reveals to you something that they don't like about you, or as you've done, don't get offended. Just let it roll right off your back. I have to do that sometimes in conversation. We both have to do it with each other. But we'll be talking, you'll say something, and it kind of pokes one of my buttons because I don't like it. Like, let's say we're talking, and you mention, you say, well, you weren't listening when I said that. Instead of getting mad, I'm like, all right, I'm not going to get offended. I'm going to let it roll off my back because we're getting somewhere. And I'm here trying to find out I'm not making this about me. I'm trying to learn about you. I'm trying to understand you. So regardless of if what you said was accurate or not, or whether that offended me, I'm going to choose right here, right now to be mature enough to not get offended because right now I'm more focused on you and on our agreement. Because
what we discovered, that trigger phrase, you're not listening, was your thing. When I was saying you're not listening, I wasn't attacking your love for me or your willingness to understand what I was trying to say. It was just, I literally just didn't think you were understanding me in that moment. Maybe I'm not saying the words right, or maybe I'm not talking loud enough or something like that. Like, you're not paying attention in that moment. I wasn't attacking your core, willingness to be a good husband to me, all that kind of stuff. But that's how you took it in the beginning when I would say you're not listening. So again, going back to all the things we said, don't get offended because if offense is not in you, and I think I said that because you said I pushed that button. Yeah. If the button's not there,
exactly,
it can't be pushed.
Exactly.
My mom used to say all the time when I was growing up, or my dad too, you can't be offended if offense is not in you.
Exactly.
And you say, well, I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. As you spend time with the Holy Spirit, and as you discover how to communicate, these offensive buttons will be removed from you. So you won't be offended. It is possible to not be offended. You got to have a relationship
with God. And I can suppose about myself. It literally happened today in church.
Okay.
Mom was teaching, and she said something that had nothing to do with this, but it just, Holy Spirit used this opportunity to bring something up to me that was a point of like personal contention for me about something you would do. And he made me realize, something you would do. And he made me realize how stupid it was of me to be offended by that. I have to take an issue with that because of what it is that I said that I wanted to be unto you. in my role as a husband.
And we talk about this after we get off.
And when he kind of like clotheslined me with, like mentally clotheslined me with it, I was like, dang. And then so what I'm trying to say is you got to have a relationship with God where he can get to you and talk to you, because this is how he's going to fix those offenses in you. Because as soon as he revealed to me that point of offense with me, and then we realized how dumb it was, I'm never going to have that issue again. It's solved now, because now I see
praise
it.
God. I need to know what that is.
I'll explain to you later. It's not that deep. You probably wouldn't even have realized what it was. It's not that deep, but it's just kind of funny.
That goes back to being able to be corrected.
Yeah.
If you're not a person that can be corrected easily, you're going to be an offended person. You are an offended person. Most people who can't be corrected are people who are easily offended all the time, because, again, they have this sense about themselves that they always right, or I know what I need, I know what I want, so, I know it when I see it. Bruh, sis, most times you don't. Mm-hmm. You don't know what you need.
Nope.
You really don't. You think you know, but all the things that you thought you needed got you in trouble. All them ex-girlfriends and ex-wives and husbands and stuff, that's proof right there. You don't know what you need.
Yeah, definitely right.
Okay.
That's not experience. That's failures, unfortunately.
Exactly, it is. So to wrap this up, it's like communication is the core to a successful marriage. And it doesn't matter how long you've been married, it can always be improved on. You grow in it. I enjoy this season of our lives more because of our communication, not because everything has always been easy. We still had challenges. We still have gone through hard things, but we can note that our communication is so much better. So we don't have that unrest that we used to have in the early days. Yep. So communication is so important. It's everything.
It's everything. Sign up for the Renovate Your Marriage Conference.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a marriage conference coming up with our church, Rapture Ministries, featuring Senior Pastor, Pastor Dana Davis, Associate Pastor, Pastor
Powerhouse,
DJ Davis,
Firehouse.
and Ministers Jalen and Cacie Barnes. That's us.
Yay.
So we're super excited. It's our church's first marriage conference. So if you're in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, you can actually attend in person. Or if you're not, then you can register online. So go to raptureministries.org/events. Link is in the description of this video or podcast.
And if you plan to attend in person,
register.
You need to register now because seats are limited. Yes. And you don't want to be
if you're attending
the ones
online,
out.
Also register, because the only way you're going to get the link to the conference when it starts. Because otherwise you're going to be waiting for it. It ain't going to happen. So register. But yeah, register for sure if you're in person, because you got to make sure we have space for you.
We have awesome stuff happening in the conference. Yeah. I'm really excited about it. Not just because we're there, but it's our first. Yeah. It's just going to be amazing because we love being in person with people and just being able to see your face. And just it's something different about when you're live with a person face to face.
So it's going to be 2 teaching sessions. There's going to be a workshop, which we're hosting, and there's going to be a couples paint parties. That's pretty cool. So giveaways and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you register for that. Link below. We promised a bonus tip maybe after we give our 3 keys, and it's very simply, very quickly, keep a journal. After you have these conversations. Yeah. Because sometimes you're not going to get a chance in the conversation to put your feelings back out there. Sometimes you're listening to the other person and you've got thoughts, write them down. Yeah. Because sometimes you get self-processed. Sometimes you don't need to throw it out there right then and there because it could cause an issue. But just write it down, and then you can become self-reflective and write down what it is that you've retained from what they said and see. You used to teach this in school. It's kind of like homework. Like, okay, as you're writing it down, that's what's committing it to memory. And you're going to write down, what did your spouse say? What did you gather from it? Try to be an analytical of your spouse. Like, what do you think they meant when they said that? Write it down and kind of process it and process your feelings. So journaling is going to be very important, and it's an aspect of our book.
Yeah, and how you felt, your emotions, all those things. And it's very important because you can go back and look at those things years later and just see your growth and your development, or see if you're still dealing with those same issues and say, okay, I need to really hone in and work on this.
So keep a journal. That's our bonus tip. All right, we're going to close out here. We want to give a special... I still wasn't ready. I was supposed to be having all the names of our channel members in front of me so that I could say
once
them
again, they're going to be on the screen.
No, I'm gonna get it this time because this is just ridiculous. You guys are important, and I just feel like I need to say your names. So bear with me while I look it up. Why don't you tell them some of the things they can get if you become a channel member? Tell the people what happens if they become a channel member. $1.99 a month.
You get us. No, well, you get access to all of our exclusive content. Like we have Death to Pornography up there. We have, what's the one you did?
Overcoming the Spirit of Depression.
Overcoming the Spirit of Depression. Those things. are available to you on demand. And the Deaths of Pornography one was very, very powerful. That was our very first center podcast. And it was amazing. So that would get you that. Plus you would get special badges, right? And then what else?
It would depend on what you do. If you choose the other, there's 2 different tiers. So there's the $199 tier, and then there's the $999 tier. $999 tier, you get discounts on merch like this.
Yeah, like our T-shirt.
We got more coming.
Yeah, we got more coming. And I just want to say, from a personal perspective, that your support means a lot to us. You know, this is what we do, and we want to do this full time. So your support helps us be able to do that. As you see, we have podcast mics, we have lights and new equipment, and we're still working on our set, you guys. It's not final yet, but those things, your support, help us get this word out. Yes. Okay, so we thank you for that.
So thank you to our current channel members: Jamaica F, Jonathan Barnes, Gemma Grace, Images by Zell, Ladine Ridley, Lindy Moyo, and Jeremy Dixon.
Hey,
thank you so much. I mean, some of y'all been subscribed for 9 months.
Oh,
I think I mean, it's great. So thank you. And if you're like, oh, well, I want to become a channel member, so here's how you do it. If you're on an Android device or you're on a computer or desktop, laptop, there's a join button next to the subscribe button. Click that. A video pops up explaining more about it, and then you can join up with your debit card, credit card, whatever. And it's a monthly subscription, $199 or $999. You get different perks for each. It explains it to you. Okay, if you're on an iOS device, that's Apple, you don't have a join button. But there's a link in the description of this video.
iOS?
That's
okay, I think you said iOS.
iOS.
I thought you said, well, like, what's iOS?
No, iPhone, iPad, stuff like that. There's no join button there. It's just different for Apple devices. So in the description of this video or this podcast, there's a link that says click to join. That link will take you to it. And again, put in your payment information, you're billed monthly. Thank you so much for your support. There will be more special productions coming.
Oh, yes.
There are a few that we're just hitting right now. Hopefully we can get them out this year. For people who want to get more of those productions and stuff. So that's coming soon. You also get early access to these podcasts, for example. So if you're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, you get early access if you're a channel member.
So basically, you're better than everybody else.
Yeah, you're better than everyone else. We love you all equally. But we appreciate it. We love you guys. We'll be back with another episode of this podcast very, very soon. So thank you so much. We are Jalen.
And Cacie.
Marriage ministers teaching you to master your marriage.
Okay, are we really saying that?
That's on our bio on like Instagram and stuff.
Okay,
so.
We still trying to figure out our new tagline.
We haven't figured out our slogan yet. Why don't we just use this slogan for Jalen Case Stories? I mean, might as well.
Okay.
Saving marriages.
One story
at a time. Out of practice. Love you guys. See you next time.